Well, hello once again, and thanks to all of my loyal subscribers for tuning in to check out more of those vintage classic off-roaders here on my Classic Dirt Bike TV channel. Now this time round we are going to take a look at a couple of very nice bikes I spotted at the Classic Motocross De Nations event that was held at Ballyblack in Northern Ireland in 2016. So as they say, without further delay, let's jump right into it and take a look at Glenn Davey's lovely Twinport CZs. Now this particular pair of Czechoslovakian Twinporters belonged to classic racer Glenn Davey, and I have to say that these are certainly a pair of the nicest that I've seen in quite some time. Now starting with Glenn's 360 Twinporter, now these are not the most popular of the CZ racers that you currently see around the racetracks of the UK, as many riders prefer the single port 360 or 380 bikes. But this 360 of Glenn's is a little cracker, and apart from the change of rear shocks and replacement exhausts, it's still a reasonably original machine. Now in terms of their success on the racetrack, these 360 Twinports were iconic motorcycles back in the heady days of the 1960s, when the likes of Paul Friedrichs were winning world titles on these very quick two-strokers. Now of course these bikes were called Twinporters because of their very unique single-cylinder two-stroke engines with a twin exhaust port that led to these twin pipes that were underslung beneath the motor and ran down either side of the bike. Now you'd think this was a crazy place to mount exhausts on a motocross bike that was going to be racing in deep mud, but nevertheless in the racing environment the idea certainly worked surprisingly well. But when it came to these big 360 Twinport motors, they were certainly powerful and generally very reliable as an off-road race bike, and Glenn's 360 appears to still have its original Zhikov carburetor fitted. Now these old Zhikov carbs were notorious for leaks and flooding, but when they were working correctly they did produce loads of power for this very quick motor. But of course many other CZ owners tended to ditch these original Zhikov carbs for a more user-friendly and much more reliable Japanese Mikuni carb. But these 360 motorcycles were designated Type 969, and they are becoming rarer to find these days, and bikes in the kind of conditions such as this example of Glenn's are fetching top money, not only in Europe but in the US as well. Although they do say that these CZ two-stroke bikes killed off the big single-cylinder four-strokes like the older BSAs when they were introduced in the 1960s, because these bikes were much quicker, much lighter, and more often than not more reliable than a British-made four-stroke. But these twin exhausts are what really made these old Czechoslovakian CZs, or CZs if you're listening in the United States. This is what made them iconic in their time, because there was simply nothing like them on a racetrack in the late 1960s. Now of course you'd think that there wouldn't be a more inappropriate place to mount a pair of exhausts on a scrambler because of their close proximity to the ground and of course subsequent potential for damage. But when you look at the World Championship race stats for these CZs, it certainly tells a different story. Now when it comes to the brakes on these CZ machines, these hubs were very good stoppers for a 1960s machine, and that's why riders who build their own specials these days use these old CZ drums because of their popularity and decent stopping power. Now as far as I recall, these old Twinporters had fiberglass fuel tanks, although they don't take too kindly to modern fuels these days, as they tend to eat away at the insides. But this of course is not really a problem if you just drain down the tank when the bike's not being used. Although you have to admit that this 360 Twinporter of Glenn's is a little belter, and there's certainly something about these old CZ smokers because they have that look that no other bike has from the 1960s. Okay, next up we are going to take a gander at Glenn's second CZ Twinport, and this is his lovely 250. Now I'm not 100% sure of the actual year of this bike, although I'm guessing here that it's a 1965 model, and once again this is another gorgeous example of one of these iconic CZ Twinporters. Now, as well you know, these 250 bikes were made world famous by Belgian rider Joël Robert, who won the 1964 World FIM 250 Championships on a similar machine to this. Now I think these were designating at the time the Type 968. But these 250 bikes were extremely light and weighed in at around 214 pounds, and they pumped out about 24 horsepower as I remember, and they also had sand cast magnesium engine casings to help keep down the overall weight of the bike. But again, another superb looking vintage bike from Glenn's collection. Now once again, that iconic Twinport single cylinder 2-stroke motor that was so popular with many of the big names in motocross back in the day, with the likes of Roger De Costa, Dave Bickers and Brad Lackey, all riding for the CZ Works factory at one time or another. But these little 250 Twinport motors were reasonably powerful. They were very quick also, although they did tend to vibrate a bit, but that never seemed to affect the engine's performance at all. But the word is that this Twinport engine was actually designed to try and overcome the cylinder distortion which was caused by excessive heat, although whether this actually cured the problem, I'm not really sure. Now the clutch operating arm on this bike is the same as the one that the legendary Joël Robert used to stick the heel of his boot into to hold the clutch disengaged when they used to do the old left hand on the helmet starts back in the day. Now you would keep your left hand touching your helmet, and when the flag dropped you'd reach for the clutch and bang it into gear and you're away, although Joël already had a better method and it worked for him time after time. But it goes without saying that these 250s were simple but well engineered motors, and of course the CZ factory already knew how to make precision mechanical instruments because they had been manufacturing all kinds of intricate handguns and weapons for many years, so building a motorcycle was not such a big deal. But you have to admit that this 250 of Glenn's is yet another lovely bike, and if you're a rider racing amongst these Twinporters and you're coming up behind one of them, there's no mistaking what kind of machine's in front of you with these twin pipes staring you in the face. And just looking at this motor with its old Jikov carburetor, the twin exhaust ports at the front, and that somewhat weird oversized looking cylinder head makes this bike a piece of art in its own right. Now these race bars are not CZ originals, and the way you can tell is that original CZ race bars have the lever hangers for the clutch and brake welded on and not bolted on with clamps as we see here. But despite that little misdemeanor, Glenn's 250 is still a lovely example. Now once again, and as in Glenn's 360 bike, a set of authentic CZ front and rear brake hubs with their proper factory fitted front forks. Now the rear suspension on Glenn's 250 are a pair of Dutch-made Ryger Classic shocks, which of course are a world away from the original PAL shocks that CZ would have bolted onto these bikes at the factory in the 1960s. Now back in the late 1960s, if you bought one of these Czechoslovakian CZs from the factory, they all came with a very comprehensive spares kit, which included a spare piston, chain, conrod kit and a host of other usable parts. Although it's said that some of the more unscrupulous dealers would commandeer these items and just add them to their spares department, leaving the unfortunate buyer to then fork out if he needed replacement parts. But anyhow, since these video clips and pictures were taken, Glenn has now gone from racing these old classic dirt bikes to now racing mountain bikes, which I hear he's also been very successful at. But nevertheless, without doubt, these are two very special bikes and are a pair of the nicest twin porters I've come across in quite some time now. It can be a rare sight seeing one of these bikes at a vintage race event these days, but catching these two beauties at the one time is certainly an honour for us all here at Classic Dirt Bike TV. And so there you have it, that's Glenn Davey's 250 and 360 CZ twin ports. Now coming soon we'll be looking at more vintage classics, and if these are the kind of motorcycles that you like looking at, then please continue to subscribe to my channel. So until next time, be safe and ride safe until we speak once again here on Classic Dirt Bike TV. This video was brought to you in association with Wealthsport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road, sports and leisure wear. Just visit their online website at wealthsport.com for more details.